consciousness, no ignorance, and also no extinction of it, and so forth until no old age and death, and also no extinction of them, no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, also no attainment, nothing to attain. The bodhisattva depends on prajnaparamita, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. In the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on prajnaparamita and attain anuttara samyak sambodhi. Therefore know that prajnaparamita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering and is true, not false. So proclaim the prajnaparamita mantra, proclaim the mantra which says gate gate para gate para sangate bodhi swaha, gate gate para gate para sangate bodhi swaha, gate gate para gate para sangate bodhi swaha.
So, and just for the benefit of anybody who's watching this afterwards as a recording, this is a discussion on the Heart Sutra, and the floors is now open. If people have questions or things they want to talk about, topics you want to bring up, I would suggest one thing. If you're not coming up with anything, what should we talk about? What would you like to talk about? What are things that you wish someone would talk about concerning the Heart Sutra? Or what things have we talked about for those who've been to previous discussions or for other discussions? What things have been talked about, but that you think need to, be talked about more or gone into more, or maybe, maybe you've heard things about the Heart Sutra that you thought didn't sound right or that you didn't like. There's a lot of things to complain about in the Heart Sutra, if you really wanted to. And in fact, one of the things that I would recommend is, and that I have recommended, is Thich Nhat Hanh's. He's got a little essay online where he explains. He doesn't put it exactly like this, but he explains his complaints about the Heart Sutra and how he thinks they should be corrected. But he's also got a whole book elaborating on that as well. But I would encourage people to read what he has, that I have a link to and somewhere, and I'll show that tonight as well. But the complaint that Thich Nhat Hanh has about the Heart Sutra is also the kind of a complaint that's also part of this famous story about one of the most famous teachers in the history of Zen, Dongshan. Dongshan, when he was very young, before he was a Buddhist, when he was just a kid, he had a tutor who was just teaching him how to read and write in Chinese, and the Heart Sutra is considered a famous enough classic that it is considered suitable, I guess, or at least this tutor thought it was suitable material for a young impressionable kid, to kind of help him learn how to read and write in Chinese characters, which actually this Heart Sutra is very good for that. And Dongshan's response was, why does it say, I have no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue? I have eyes, I have ears, I have nose, I have a tongue. Why does it say that? And so the tutor's response to that, which is very, very wise response, he said, "Don't ask me. If you want to ask questions like that, you need a Zen teacher. So go find a Zen teacher. Um, I don't. I just, they don't pay me enough to answer questions like that." And and so Thich Nhat Hanh's response was, well, and this here I'm paraphrasing Thich Nhat Hanh, but he's saying, well, actually should say it a little differently than that because it's easy for people to kind of latch on to all of the no's in the Heart Sutra and to come away with a nihilistic, or some people pronounce it nihilistic, but I think it's nihilistic interpretation. Um, and so Thich Nhat Hanh felt that the way that the Heart Sutra was written down by Xuanzang 1500 years ago was too open to a nihilistic interpretation and needed to be tweaked a little bit. So he explains about that, which is um, uh, you know, my take on that is that I I think that the Heart Sutra as it is probably doesn't need to be tweaked like that. Although I mean, it is true that people mis interpret the Heart Sutra as being um, you know nihilistic or well, and often they misinterpret their own understanding of the Heart Sutra, thinking, "Oh, I understand the Heart Sutra, yes." And that actually, Thich Nhat Hanh tells a funny story about that, where someone tells their teacher, "Oh, yes, I understand the Heart Sutra," and the teacher says, "Well, the Heart Sutra says no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. Do you believe it?" And the student, of course, says, "Oh, yes, of course, the Heart Sutra says it, so I believe it." So that then the teacher, of course, you know, hits him over the head and says, Heart Sutra says there's no body. So what did I just hit? Anyway, so which is, to always be careful with Zen teachers, be, look to see if they have a stick nearby. Um, anyway, so has that prodded anybody to think of anything or something you'd like to bring up or complain about or ask about in the Heart Sutra or because really all of the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism are in the Heart Sutra. So that sometimes that um, uh, yeah, there it's all in there, but it's also interesting to go through what the actual words of the Heart Sutra are and see what teachings of Mahayana Buddhism are where and how they're being expressed. Um, and we could talk about that a little bit. Um, and oh, I see Tom has unmuted. Always a dangerous sign.
Yeah. My interpretation, excuse me, my interpretation has been that what they're describing is the Buddha at uh, at enlightenment, and I think before he's in a state of deep samadhi and is not so in his perception, he is not focused on his tongue, his nose, his
Hmm.
ears, his mouth. He is in almost as a state of nirvana
Hmm.
and is not therefore uh, focused on or concentrating on his sense organs.
And it actually says that, right? It says, perceives that all five skandhas are empty and is
Yeah,
saved from all suffering and distress. And that comes
yeah.
very early in the Heart Sutra. That's kind of the setting the stage.
And so if he's not, if the Buddha is not, uh, let's just say, paying attention to, right,
Uh-huh. Okay.
these sense inputs, that he's not suffering.
Hmm. Catherine, also
Um, I,
unmuted.
yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Uh, okay, well, I kind of thought, Manhi, is that how is that how, Money? Okay, you're muted, but I can't hear you, but, I kind of take it the same as, my true nature, our true nature, is not about any of the senses or the physical stuff. It's, another dimension or whatever you want to say it. It's out of the body,
Hmm.
and that's how I take it.
Okay. So
Is
it's
that how
kind of,
you take it,
I don't
Kurt?
want to, I don't want to put words into your mouth, Catherine, but that's kind of a, I am not this body sort of, approach, which is, which actually, so the Buddha taught, he taught when the Buddha taught no self, he taught separate things that people think of as the self. And one of the things that people think of as the self that people identify with as who they are is their physical self, their physical body. And the Buddha taught that is not who you are. That is not, who the Buddha said it much better than I am, but, um, and I am not this body is not necessarily a strictly Buddhist teaching. I think Hindu teachers often teach exactly the same thing. Um, but identification with the body is kind of a problem. But then if you read the Heart Sutra and it makes sense, and you think, now I'm not identified with my body anymore, I'm free, then you need a Zen master to come along and hit you over the head. Um, because, getting it, seeing into it is good, but then thinking that you've got it uh, can be a problem and get stuck there.
I just
Yeah,
unmuted, so I'll get it's pronounced Manhe.
Manhe. Yeah.
Yes.
But since this is supposed to be the core of the
Hmm.
Prajnaparamita, is that
Uh-huh.
why he didn't go into a lot of explanation of words? He just says no eyes, no ears. It's kind of the pared down version.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely the pared down version. Yeah.
But since we're
Although,
talking about
yeah.
nose, what is
Uh-huh.
the difference with the moo, the boo, and the bull?
With
Why
the,
are they all moo? Why are there different words for no?
I'm sorry. So what are the different words for no?
Moo, boo, and
Oh,
bull.
so there's two different words that are used for mu in the Heart Sutra, and sometimes they're pronounced slightly differently. So sometimes the mu character it is pronounced bur, and sometimes it's pronounced bull. And actually, in Chinese or Korean, the L and the R sounds are sometimes they're not differentiated, and sometimes actually, if you listen to Korean people speak, sometimes they do say bull, and sometimes they do say bur, you know. but but so that's all mu, the character mu, the like Joshu said mu. Okay, but then there's also um, the a character I think is also pronounced boo, boo, which is not. So there's six knots and 21 moves or something. I count them up once and I wrote it down somewhere, but I can never remember exactly. There are six knots, but I don't think there's any particular difference between why sometimes it says not and why it says no. And the no can also be, the mu can also be translated as without. Um, but it's worth looking into. But I would say that in order to really look into it, you have to look at the Chinese characters themselves and look at commentaries that are based upon. Well, and also, if you can, there are Sanskrit versions. It's not clear whether the Sanskrit came first or the Chinese came first. But if the Sanskrit did come first, then you might find some difference in the Sanskrit, what's being translated as not and what's being translated as no. Um, but that's not something I you know it is good to look at the words and to say, why is this word used here, and is there any difference? Oh, someone else is unmuted. Good. Hi, Elia. Is it Elia?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
I've got an AC on here. I'll try to speak up. So I wanted to ask a question, but I wanted to comment first on sort of the interesting nature of the fact that a lot of these chants and sutras have been transliterated from one language to another like several times on the way to us
Mm-hmm.
receiving them
Mm-hmm.
in, as English speakers, or at least having an English language tradition. And I always thought that the Heart Sutra was a particularly interesting example with the mantra being rendered in Sanskrit in both the English and the Korean versions of the Heart Sutra, but
Mm-hmm.
slightly differently.
Yeah.
I always sort
Mm-hmm.
of just enjoyed that. But the question I wanted to ask was in terms of that lengthy catalog of negations. Do you have any thoughts on the structural scheme that they're presented in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is. And so, and I won't go into it in any depth, but if you read, um, there's two commentaries in particular that do go into it in some depth. One is by a Tibetan teacher called Sodargye Rinpoche, and then the other one is by Red Pine. It's a fairly well known commentary and translation. And in fact, so I came up with a list of questions that I'm going to give to people at the end to think about, because we'll get together again in a month. But one of the questions that I have is for people to think about if you have access to Red Pine's translation and commentary on the Heart Sutra is, why does Red Pine talk so much about the Sarvastivadins? The Sarvastivadins were a Buddhist sect, an early Buddhist sect, and one interpretation of the Heart Sutra is that it was intended as, well, either a critique of Sarvastivadin philosophy, because the scheme, how did you put it, Elia, the schema or the structure?
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So that was taken directly from Sarvastivadin philosophy, and so my understanding of early Indian Buddhist philosophy is very shallow, but from what I understand is that the Sarvastivadins believed that, as all Buddhists believe, that all compounded things are impermanent. But they also believed that they had come up with a list of the things that are not compounded, and that those things are not impermanent, that they are the ultimate dharmas that everything else is made out of. The way people used to think of atoms, people used to think of atoms as being the ultimate building blocks of the universe, and then one day they figured out they could take the atoms apart, and then
It
they thought,
sounds
well,
like the
these,
scheme of
what's
elements. Yeah. This sounds like the scheme of like the four classical elements or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but there's more than four. There's a bunch of things, and so all the no's, and not only all the no's in the Heart Sutra, but even the places where it says and so forth, that leaves out a whole bunch of other no's, and so that so Red Pine's version, if I remember, it's been a while since I read this, and I've read it in other places. Red Pine's take on it, which is kind of disappointing, if you is that the Heart Sutra is just a critique of Sarvastivadin philosophy, which doesn't interest me. Why? I don't think we would still be chanting the Heart Sutra today. I don't think it would be almost certainly the most popular Buddhist practice in the world, chanting the Heart Sutra, if it was just a critique of Sarvastivadin philosophy. Thich Nhat Hanh refers a little bit to this in his writings on the Heart Sutra, and he says it's an encouragement to the Sarvastivadins to examine their philosophy more carefully. He always has a very nice way of putting things. Um, so, which it, and so I think that in part, I think the Heart Sutra is, because it isn't just Sarvastivadin philosophy that's being, kind of negated. The Four Noble Truths are negated. The 12 links in the path of the 12 links in independent origination are negated. Um, uh, the very idea that the Buddha attained enlightenment is negated. So it's an encouragement for us all to examine whatever our ideas about Buddhism are more carefully, really, whether we're Sarvastivadins or not. And if anybody here is a Sarvastivadin, I have nothing but respect for them. I mean, they were, I mean, they were, they really contributed tremendously to the development of our understanding of the Dharma because they were so kind of methodical and like to make lists and things like that. It's going to be very helpful.
So there's a Sodargye Abbey in Washington. Is that part of the same lineage?
Almost certainly not. They actually died out, by it's unlikely that there were any Sarvastivadins left when Xuanzang wrote the Heart Sutra as we know it. But they live on in their writings. They wrote a lot, and their writings got preserved because people highly valued their philosophical insights, even though a lot of times people valued their philosophical insights as kind of a foil for their own explanation of what they thought the correct Dharma is. But it's always good to have someone,
I have a question regarding Heart Sutra, and that is, we have typically with Theravada Buddhists, we
Mhm,
have a
mhm,
mutual respect for the teachings of the
mhm.
other. And so, how do they regard the Heart Sutra? Is this something they pay attention to, or just say, that's nice that you believe that, or how do they regard that?
Yeah, as far as I know, although in Sodargye Rinpoche's commentary on the Heart Sutra is a very interesting statement. He claims that the Heart Sutra is actually recited and respected by Theravada Buddhists. I don't know where he got that from, and I'm pretty sure he may have either made that up or heard something from someone to that effect. But I, I mean, the Heart Sutra is a Mahayana Buddhist text. Um, there are many Theravada Buddhists who do appreciate and read, and there are many people who don't make that clear of a distinction. I was just watching a video of a bunch of people chanting um, a white Tara mantra, and the person who's leading the chant is probably one of the better known Hindu Buddhist chant leaders in the West, but she's also very interested in anyway. So Theravada Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, it's all good, but the Heart Sutra is outside of it's not part of their body of sacred texts. Um, so they're free to think whatever they want of it. Whereas the same isn't true for all of the sacred texts of the Theravada Buddhists are part of our tradition. We do not have, we include all of that in our um, tradition in Mahayana Buddhism. If you're a Mahayana Buddhist, if you're really a Mahayana Buddhist, you have to accept all that stuff. Are we good to keep going? There's sometimes we take like a break partway through, but everybody should just be comfortable. You don't have to, you know, don't have to sit in any rigid meditation position. I think we should just keep going, keep discussing. Elliot was trying to unmute, but he turned his camera. No? Okay, sorry. Um, oh yeah. So there's one thing that what we were talking about earlier made me think of, which is that um, the so the Prajnaparamita teachings are often, which is what the Heart Sutra is. Heart Sutra is part of the Prajnaparamita teachings, which is not all of Mahayana Buddhism. It's kind of a part of Mahayana Buddhism, and that's an interesting thing to think about. I should add that to my list of questions for things for people to think about. What else is there in Mahayana Buddhist teaching besides the Prajnaparamita? But Prajnaparamita teachings tend to really strongly emphasize non-dualism. And in fact, in addition, so there are like these kind of boring Prajnaparamita sutras. There's like the Prajnaparamita Sutra of 8,000 lines, the Prajnaparamita Sutra of 25,000 lines, and the Prajnaparamita Sutra of 80,000 lines. And those, when I say they're boring, I mean they just repeat themselves a lot. Although, and also, I don't want to mention any names, but there are no really good English translations of them either. And although some people might disagree with me on the translators, but there's the Heart Sutra is a Prajnaparamita teaching, and the Diamond Sutra is also a very important Prajnaparamita teaching. And the Diamond Sutra is very, very focused on a non-dualism, and kind of related to the, as a little tangent related to the question that Van He asked. I found a very short little essay that Bhikkhu Bodhi, very famous Theravada Buddhist teacher, wrote about non-dualism and how non-dualistic teachings are not correct Buddhist teaching from a Theravada Buddhist point of view. And so I'll try to include a link to that in the description of this video. It's very interesting to read what he had to say. But one of the things that I think helps to make the Heart Sutra, one of the reasons why I think it isn't necessarily the case, like Thich Nhat Hanh says, that the Heart Sutra needs to be tweaked so that people don't go overboard with the negations and become nihilistic, is because actually if you look at the beginning and the end of the Heart Sutra, it's very dualistic. You know, at the beginning it says that it says Avalokiteshvara in our English version. Actually, in the Chinese version, it says Guanjia, which is a different name for the same bodhisattva, but it's not Avalokiteshvara. But Guanjia perceives that all five skandhas are empty and is saved from all suffering and distress. And that's a very dualistic statement that says there is suffering, you can get released from suffering, and this is what you do in order to get rid of suffering. And then at the end, it goes on and on and on about the great bright mantra, the great transcendent mantra, about all the great things that chanting the mantra can do for you, which is also, it's not saying that the mantra is empty. It's not saying that there is no mantra. It's saying, here is this wonderful mantra, and everybody should chant it, and it will be really great. And it also says, in the same section, just after having said there is no attainment and nothing to attain, which is pretty much close to the end of the non-dualistic section of the Heart Sutra, then it says all Buddhists depend on Prajnaparamita and attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. And so there's both dualistic teachings and non-dualistic teachings in the Heart Sutra, and that's I think that's a kind of an important thing to, at least for me, it seems like an important thing to come to terms with. So I tend to prefer non-dualistic teachings because they're not telling me what to do. Non-dualistic teachings always leave it up to me. Oh, well, you know, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. You know, maybe you can, maybe, you know, but when it says you should do this practice, and then you will be relieved from all suffering and distress. That's so another thing about dualistic teachings is they tend to be prescriptive, which is another way of saying it's telling you what to do. But even though I prefer, personally, non-dualistic teachings, I also, like most people who practice Zen or any kind of Mahayana Buddhism that emphasizes non-dualistic teachings, I often find myself wishing someone would just tell me what to do. Anyway, I have a funny little story about that. So one of the things on my list of suggested reading for the Heart Sutra is Zen Master Sheng Yen's Sheng Yen's book on the Heart Sutra, which I'm just starting to read. But he became a Buddhist monk at the age of 15 and was very poor, and just the only reason why he anyway. So make a long story short, he always was only able to be in monasteries that were already very poor, and he just had to work basically. I mean, his training, consisted of doing jobs to make money for the very various poor monasteries that he was, which were the only ones who would take him in. And then eventually he was recognized as someone who had some potential, and so he was sent to a more higher class monastery where people actually studied Buddhism and practiced meditation. Um, and so he was really excited to meet people who had received proper meditation instruction. And he told them, I've been trying to meditate for years, and I have no idea what I'm doing or what I'm supposed to do. And of course, they all said, "Excellent. That's you've got it." Anyway, that's Footprints in the Snow is his autobiography where he tells that story. It's a crazy story because he was in China during the Communist Revolution and barely made it out alive in 1949. Made it to Taiwan. And of course, once he got to Taiwan, the only way he could get to Taiwan, he had by that time managed to become more of a proper monk, but the only way he could get to Taiwan was by getting a job in the military where they wouldn't let him be a monk. And so then he had to, like, for the next 10 years, he just had to work. And he worked in a part of the military where you weren't allowed to leave, ever. So it's another interesting part of his story. All right, so more questions about the Heart Sutra, or does anybody have any idea what isn't in the Heart Sutra? If so, the Prajnaparamita teachings are not all there is to Mahayana Buddhism in some sense. In some sense, and if you read most commentaries on the Heart Sutra, will say that the entire Bodhisattva path is laid out in the Heart Sutra, and yet there's not every teaching that one can think of is actually in the Heart Sutra. I'm thinking of one right now. Pretty sure that's right. Yeah.
Doesn't seem to talk very much about compassion compared to some of the other ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are two main terms for compassion in Chinese terms for compassion in Buddhism, and neither one of them is in the Heart Sutra. So sometimes one of the names of Avalokiteshvara, in addition to like Avalokiteshvara or Kuan Yin or Kuan Chi Yin or Kuan Jiaje, which is the name in the Heart Sutra, another name for Avalokiteshvara is De Jia De Bi, which is great love, great compassion. Jia and Bi are different words for compassion. Those two words do not appear in the Heart Sutra. Those are the primary Buddhist terms for compassion. So yeah, and yet you can't say that. I mean, so that my personal opinion is that's one of the reasons why the Heart Sutra is taught by the Bodhisattva of compassion, to make it clear that that's what this teaching is about. It isn't, and that's the direction that the teaching is pointed in, and so it's all about compassion, and without using that word. And the one I was thinking of was Buddha nature. There's no mention of Buddha nature in the Heart Sutra, and yet you could make the same sort of argument. Of course, it's about Buddha nature. How else are you going to ever see your own Buddha nature? See your true nature, other than contemplating deeply the Prajnaparamita. But that's not in there. Hi, Fatima.
Hi, yes, it's my first time in this class, so it's quite interesting just learning a little bit more here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think sort of my sort of first experience with the Heart Sutra was it was quite surreal actually because it was almost like sort of love at first sight, as in I didn't really. I was sort of practicing meditation for stress relief at our local Triratna centre, and you just sort of go along to the stuff because the people are quite friendly without
Mm-hmm.
really taking it too seriously. And I was in the middle of some quite critical exams and had a lot of stress, and I saw the Heart Sutra, and I liked it enough, so I just read the English translation aloud, and I had a recording on my iPhone, and I played it before I went into exams for stress relief. So I don't know. I suppose sort of thinking back to that and sort of getting down to why I felt that connection. I think it almost felt like I suppose my mind was just at that stage where it was just possibly getting away from its true nature, analysis paralysis or whatever, and sort of just doing too much and thinking too much, and maybe this sense of possibly it's almost like it's kind of nihilism, but also that sort of counterbalances all those formations and overthinking I was having, and that
Yeah.
sort of calmed that down a bit. So that for me, that was quite significant at the time.
Mm-hmm. Hallelujah. The power of the Heart Sutra.
And it's only sort of more recently I've sort of started learning a bit more about the thinking, but I'd say that just really
Yeah.
struck me, like that was
Yeah.
sort of oh wow, that's pretty cool.
And and in more than one commentary that the a, a point related to what you're saying is made that there's a lot of teaching that encourages people just to do the Heart Sutra, recite the Heart Sutra, recite the Heart Sutra a lot, recite the Heart Sutra, you know, every day, recite the Heart Sutra 108 times every day or whatever. But then, which I totally agree with, but then there's also encouragement to understand the Heart Sutra. Now understanding the Heart Sutra doesn't just come and doesn't primarily come from reading books about it and talking, to people about it, but those things can help. But probably reciting the Heart Sutra is definitely the basis for understanding it, um, practicing it, and then even as you're trying to understand it, part of that understanding comes from taking that questioning, on into your meditation. You can, and it's not like necessarily, it's not like you will sit down. I'm going to meditate now, and I'm going to think about the Heart Sutra for 30 minutes or whatever. Although people do that, you can do that. Um, and one of the reasons why the Heart Sutra is structured the way it is because you can go through it and look at all these different points that are being raised. It has the five skandhas are there. It has the different sense elements and the objects of the sense elements and the 12 links in the chain of dependent origination and the four noble truths, and those are all there, and you can use that as a guide in meditation for looking into these basic Buddhist teachings. But I don't I usually don't do that kind of meditation, but I can see that. But that's a wonderful story, and I have to believe. I mean, I can relate to it personally. I don't think I've had that exact kind of experience, but I have to believe that that's one of the reasons why it's the most popular Buddhist practice that there is. It's easy and it's short, but that helps. Oh, so Elia raised the thorny question of the Heart Sutra in English, right? And then also the mantra in Sanskrit. Um, and so there's a lot of there's a lot to look into there. But one thing that's important to know is that actually since Xuanzang, who lived about 1500 years ago, since he went to India from China and came back with the Heart Sutra, everybody has chanted the same Heart Sutra since then in East Asia. And so And the Chinese language has obviously changed a great deal since I mean it's 1,500 years ago. If you think about English, the English language didn't exist 1,500 years ago. But if you try to read or listen to something that is even like 500-year-old English, it's incomprehensible. But everybody in not only in China but Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, throughout East Asia, all chants what everybody chants what Xuanzang wrote down, character by character, 260 characters, 260 syllables. Although the Japanese, they added 2 extra characters, and some of the characters they pronounce with 2 syllables, but that's the way. No offense, but that's the way the Japanese are. They do everything. I mean, the Koreans do everything their own way too, and so do the Vietnamese. But they're all chanting the same thing, and it's only when Buddhism came to the West. Well, it's not completely true, because now in Korea there are a lot of people who have translated the Heart Sutra into Korean, and so there's the people who prefer to chant it in Korean, and people who think that's a terrible idea. I'm one of the latter. But Thich Nhat Hanh was a major advocate for Vietnamese people to chant the Heart Sutra in Vietnamese. And of course, there are a lot of Vietnamese Buddhists who think that's a terrible idea. It's kind of like what the Catholic Church went through back in Vatican II when they got rid of Latin. And so a lot of people, I always liked what Joseph Campbell said about Vatican II. He said they got it wrong. They should have kept the Latin, but brought in women priests and let priests get married. But instead they did the exact opposite. But that's, I think that's a matter of taste. People will always do things the way that they think is best. And people will always come along and say, Thich Nhat Hanh, not only does he want to translate the Heart Sutra into Vietnamese, he also says, oh, even the original, Chinese that Xuanzang did is a little wrong, and he wants to fix that. So Buddhists, you can't tell Buddhists what to do. I mean, you can try. So I think people who want to chant it in English, that's the way some people are going to be. And what Zen Master Sung San, my teacher's teacher, his solution was chant it twice. Chant it in an English translation and chant the original, but with the Korean pronunciation, so that we have both. And we have, and when we talk about it, what do we talk about? We have to talk, unless you want to study classical Chinese, we have to talk about the English. And then we refer back, what does this word really mean? So we have to have some reference back to the original. And then there's some people who will say, well, no, the Chinese is not what you should be looking at. You should be looking at the Sanskrit. And then there's also the Tibetan, which is somehow related to both the Chinese and the Sanskrit. Oh, and also the mantra is interesting too, because everybody claims to be chanting the mantra in Sanskrit, but in Korea it sounds different, in Vietnam it sounds different, in Mandarin it sounds different, in Cantonese it sounds different, and in English it sounds different. And Sanskrit is actually quite difficult to pronounce precisely. Oh, yeah. So I do have some, and I'm going to. So I hope. Does everybody here have access to YouTube? You'll be able to look at this later on. So I'm going to share some links. When I post this, the recording of this, I'll put the links that I'm referring to in the description of the YouTube video. But let's see. Oh, I have to share my screen so you can see it. I'll put this up. Share my screen. Questions. All right. And so this is referring to Red Pine's book, Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Sodargye Rinpoche's book, Kuiji's book. Kuiji was Xuanzang's student who also wrote his own commentary on the Heart Sutra, which is available for free for download, and the Dalai Lama's book. So, why does Red Pine talk so much about the Sarvastivadins? What do they have to do with anything? Which is an interesting question, still in my mind. What does Thich Nhat Hanh think Xuanzang got wrong, and why does it matter? And then Sodargye Rinpoche's commentary is quite interesting, and is also one of these that's freely available for download from his website, and I'll have a link to it. He divides up the core part, the part that has all the no's and the nots in it. He divides that up into the foundation prajnaparamita, the path prajnaparamita, and the result paramita. And he has very substantial commentaries on each of those, like 20 to 30 pages that he talks about. It's quite interesting. And so, what do you think about that? Kuiji, in his commentary, he spends over half of it. It's like 120 pages or 110 pages. Yeah, I think it's like 110 pages in translation. About 60 pages he spends just on the one line while practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, which is kind of interesting, I think. And the Dalai Lama, in his commentary, at the end of his commentary, he talks about the mantra, and he goes through the mantra one syllable at a time and talks about how the mantra can be used as a map of the Bodhisattva path. So that's something interesting to look at. And so I'm not suggesting to go and read all of those books, but I am suggesting it might be a good idea to read one of them, or start reading one of them, look at them, especially the ones that you can just go find and download without having to purchase a book. Although, actually, the ones that I put up there, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Red Pine's translation, but he does have a lot of, it's actually quite interesting. If I was going to read one translation and commentary, I wouldn't recommend that one as the only one. But actually, other people would say, what are you talking about? Of course, that's the best one. So anyway, those are some questions to think about over the next month. I want to give a plug for this Saturday. At this same Zoom link that you came to come to this, there will be a medicine Buddha practice on in Eastern time. It'll go from, you can come for part or all of it, but we'll actually read the entire Medicine Buddha Sutra twice, do quite a bit of chanting, including reciting the Medicine Buddha Dharani and chanting the name of the Medicine Buddha. And so there'll be one practice session from 3 to 5 p.m. in Eastern time, and one practice session from 6 to 8 p.m. And in the hour in between, I'll be online also chanting the Diamond Sutra for anybody who wants to join in with that. So I call it Medicine Buddha Palooza when we do that once a month on Saturday for that. So yeah, Tom.
So here in Tulsa, I've been for the past 12 years. I just kind of took a step back, but the leader of an English language Sangha, but we are given our space from a Vietnamese temple. So it's called Tam Bao Temple. And the two Sanghas, the English language and the Vietnamese, we interact a lot on all major holidays and stuff. But I didn't know, when you mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh speaking about the encouragement or not of the Vietnamese chanting the Heart Sutra in Vietnamese. So we quickly texted one of the people I converse with there and asked them, do they chant the Heart Sutra in Vietnamese? And she says, yes, they do.
They do, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so you could probably easily start a fight among Vietnamese Buddhists by bringing that up. And with the, it could be a touchy subject. And it's a touchy subject among Korean Buddhists, because the same thing is going on in Korean Buddhism. Some people are very attached to, like I am, to the old way of chanting the Heart Sutra in Sino-Korean, and some people think, oh, nobody understands it, so we have to, which is true. But I always say, you can translate it all you want, and I still don't understand it. That's my answer. But anyway, but I also like Zen Master Suksan's answer, which was just do it twice. Okay, so we'll end by just doing it once together. Or it's 8 o'clock now, and so I'm gonna play the just the English Heart Sutra once more for us to chant together. Let's see if I can find it. It's always a hard part for me because I had it and now I don't. Oh, here it is. Good. There. Sorry for the delay.
Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the prajna paramita, perceives that all five skandhas are empty and is saved from all suffering and distress. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness, form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth until no realm of mind. Consciousness, no ignorance, and also no extinction of it, and so forth until no old age and death, and also no extinction of them. No suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, also no attainment, nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva depends on prajna paramita, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. In the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on prajna paramita and attain anuttara samyak sambodhi. Therefore know that prajna paramita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering and is true, not false. So proclaim the prajna paramita mantra, proclaim the mantra which says gate gate para sangate bodhi swaha, gate gate para sangate bodhi swaha, gate gate
Thanks, everybody. Been great to see you all, and thanks for all the discussion, the input, and I hope to see you all soon. Maybe this Saturday, maybe next Tuesday. We'll meet together on we meet together on every Tuesday to just chant, no talking, just chanting. But we'll meet again in a month for more talking, and I hope to see you all soon. Thanks for coming. Bye bye.